You're watching Access Minnesota. Here's Jim Dubois.
Some Minnesotans prefer to while away the winter in a state of semi-hibernation, but for some of us, winter is a time for outdoor fun. Joining us is C.J. Johnson from Explore Minnesota Tourism. C.J., welcome back to Access Minnesota.
Thank you much, Jim.
C.J., we often think of the big tourist seasons in Minnesota to encompass spring, summer, and fall. How big, from an economic standpoint, is the impact of winter tourism in the state?
Well, tourism overall for the year in Minnesota is worth about $10 billion to the state in jobs and taxes and so forth. And the winter tourism is growing so much, and has been ever since the snowmobile arrived on the scene, that it's probably worth a fourth of the total $10 billion in the state of Minnesota. That's an awful lot. But then we also have a variety of outdoor winter things to do.
And let's talk about those. What are some of the most popular outdoor winter activities?
Much like summer, believe it or not, people like to sit on a pail, punch a hole in some really hard water, and pull fish through it. Fishing is the #1 draw to Minnesota. Even in the winter, it's really popular. And we have all sorts of events and fishing tournaments and great places to go. And you don't have to sit outside in a pail. Nowadays, they've got some fabulous fish houses, some of them with flat screen TVs, indoor running water. You wouldn't believe it, but it actually does exist in some of these fabulous fish houses they put out on these lakes. But it draws an awful lot of people. Skiing, downhill, and cross-country trails in Minnesota are just unbelievable, as you can imagine with the woods we have in most of the state. And downhill skiing, I think we have close to 17 downhill ski runs in areas in Minnesota. They're fabulous as well. We haven't had a lot of success with snow early on in the last 2 years or 3 years, but luckily for downhill in particular, most of the ski areas in Minnesota make snow.
Now, we talked about some of the more well-known winter activities. There's an activity that I just heard of a couple of minutes ago from Charlotte on our crew. And what is skioring?
Well, you take the hot dog and you put it on the stick. And, oh, skioring, oh yeah. It's skiing, but it's skiing in a totally different way. That is, you're on a leash, if you will. I consider myself on the leash. The dog had its own way. And it would run down the trails. This is up by Ely, Minnesota. I did this a couple of years ago. And you're literally on skis behind the dog in a fashion doing trails. It really is neat. You can also go and mush a dog team up there if you want to. There's several places in Minnesota where you can rent, if you will, and or be trained in order to run and mush a dog sled team, which is kind of fun too.
CJ, let's talk about some of the more popular vacation destinations in Minnesota in winter.
Well, usually you're looking for a state park, believe it or not. We have something like 79 or 72 state parks in all of Minnesota. A lot of them, most all of them have great facilities. Most all of them now have trails with regard to being able to cross-country ski. And most all of them have lakes, one place or another in them, so there's ice fishing. Some of them have camping even in the winter. Some of them have camping hookups in the winter. So state parks all across the state of Minnesota are very popular. But the ideal spots for most people to go in the winter for outdoor recreation is probably the northern third, from Brainerd all the way up to Baudette, Lake of the Woods, that type of thing.
Let's talk about winter festivals. The St. Paul Winter Carnival, obviously the longest running winter celebration. Tell us more about that and maybe some of the festivals that aren't quite as well known.
Yeah, the Winter Carnival is a very famous outdoor event for Minnesota and has been around for decades really, and still is and still will be. And they change it up a little bit every year. It used to be kind of the same year after year after year, but now they do have an ice castle some years, they don't some years. They have the ice sculpturing for the Winter Carnival. Draws sculptors, ice sculptors from all around the world. I think last year there were 2 from Japan that were here working on the Winter Carnival. Great festivals all over. They have usually pond hockey tournaments during the Winter Carnival as well. They're fabulous, they're fabulous. But then you have some tournaments too, not tournaments, but outdoor festivals that you have to scratch your head a little bit. I would, but then I'd lose some more hair, so I'm not going to do that. But like the Grumpy Old Men Festival down in Wabasha that happens in February, I believe it is, each year. It started after the Grumpy Old Men movie series that was based in the movie in Wabasha, Minnesota. And they still have the Rigetti spaghetti dinner and so forth. They have a fish house parade as well. And great fun down in little teeny towns along the Mississippi River in Wabasha, Minnesota, which is kind of a nice, fun thing. Up in Brainerd, they have the world's largest, I believe, I think Guinness has already certified it, the world's largest ice fishing contest with a $150,000 prize, top prize. Now, I think it pays down to 100 places, and 100th place is $10,000. Or maybe it's a new Ford truck or something like this. They put the prizes in from 2 to 100 randomly. Draw the prizes out of a hat. So third place might be $50 worth of fishing gear, but 100th place is 10 grand. Fun.
And CJ, we spent some time talking about outdoor destinations, outdoor festivals, outdoor activities, but there is a very popular indoor destination in Minnesota, in Bloomington, that draws a lot of people from around the world. Tell us about the Mall of America and how that is Minnesota's, its premier in terms of the sheer number of visitors, tourist destination in the state, correct?
It is. It gets over 44 million visits a year at the Mall of America, and I think that's going up every year. I haven't seen new numbers for about 2 years out there. It is the largest draw in Minnesota for a destination. Fishing is still the largest draw for people to come and visit and recreate in Minnesota. It's been phenomenal for the state, and I believe they're still working on almost doubling the size.
Explore Minnesota Tourism has a variety of resources for people who are planning their vacations, want to learn more about activities. Tell us about the resources Explore Minnesota Tourism offers.
Yeah, we have a website, exploreminnesota.com, that is just phenomenal. There's thousands of pages of information. I would get lost on it if it wasn't for a really good search engine. So you can really narrow down quickly what you're looking for and want. We also have live travel counselors Monday through Friday during business hours at 1-888-TOURISM. If you call them, get one of the live counselors, and you're really not sure what you want to do. So you say, well, we have a family of 3, one small kid about 5 years old. We also like to take our dog along. We would like to, in the summertime, we'd like to have a little resort area that has a beach and maybe some place where we could go shop or birding or something. If you give the counselor all of this information on what you would like to do, and you're not hooked up to the internet or something, they'll put it into a special program they have at Tourism, come out with all of your options, and send them right to your front door.
CJ Johnson from Explore Minnesota Tourism, thanks so much for coming back with us on Access Minnesota.
My pleasure, Jim.
That's all for this edition of Access Minnesota. Coming up next month, we're going to be talking with Margaret Carlson, the retiring CEO of the University of Minnesota Alumni Association. Margaret will share her experiences as the CEO of that organization and also look ahead to the future of the University of Minnesota. Also, a review of the Obama administration's first year in office. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Access Minnesota. Issues that matter to you. Join us again next week as we bring you the newsmakers and stories that shape our everyday lives. Access Minnesota is produced by the Minnesota Broadcasters Association in cooperation with the University of Minnesota's College of Liberal Arts.